Hi, Carla.
Hello, good morning.
How are you?
I'm all right, actually. I'm quite happy. I've got my coffee. I'm ready to go.
That's all we need. So
Yeah.
this week, your choice of topic,
hmm
and we're going to talk about reinforcement and actually get into the nuts and bolts of what reinforcement actually is, not what people maybe sometimes think that it is.
Yes. Um, it's one of my favorite subjects, and it's something that I love to talk to my clients about because it really gets their brains thinking. Their brain cells really rub together with this one. So
Well, let's hope that people are ready to have their brain cells rubbed together in this episode.
yeah. And I think we've spoken a lot in very like chatty terms about things, and maybe this one is just going to inject a little bit of info so people can do some learning in it as well. Not they're not learning from other ones, but we don't want to
Yeah,
keep things too sciencey and rigid. But this one, I think there'll be some good info in.
excellent. Let's get on it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start off with what we define reinforcement is because it's quite a sciencey term when you get into the like nuts and bolts of it's a term that we throw around quite a lot, isn't it? But
Mm-hmm.
actually it's a scientific term. It has a specific meaning.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want
And
me
I
to do
often, yeah,
it?
you could go on.
it
You've
was
got a
it
good
was
term
the way
for
you looked at me like, okay, let's go.
it.
So reinforcement is defined as anything that increases the likelihood of a behavior occurring again in the future once it's been presented. So
Whether that's positive or
yeah,
negative.
and again, positive and negative. My least favorite terms in dog training. Positive means that something is added. So a piece of food is added and then the
hmm
behavior increases. That's positive reinforcement.
hmm
Positive is, if I think of them as like mathematical symbols, so positive is adding something.
Yeah,
And negative doesn't mean horrible. It means that something is taken away, like a
yeah,
subtraction symbol. That's
yeah.
the only way in the 15 years and 3 degrees I've got that I understand positive and
yeah,
negative is by converting it into a plus sign or a takeaway sign.
yeah. Me and Steph have the same conversation often where we're like, so that fits under the umbrella of, and we're both going, hold on, let's maths.
Yeah. When I assess dog trainers in their oral assessment, we give them an example and then they have to put it into one of the quadrants. And
Yeah.
you can see the brain cells
hmm
worrying about, right, okay, something is added and it increases the behavior afterwards. That's positive reinforcement.
Yeah. We were going to so we do our live webinars for treetops, and we're going to do one of these on that where we put
Yeah.
some different scenarios in and we get people to pick it apart. But I said to
Yeah.
Steph, I was like, until I am really hot on
Until I can do
very
it
quickly
myself.
saying what it is, I'm not going to ask my poor clients because I'm going to be like, yeah,
I think it
I
is. And
talk
it,
about quadrants.
yeah, I mean, I love the quadrants and I do feel like I have a good handle and I can grab them pretty quick to mind. But there are some examples where there are multiple different things happening that then
mm,
makes it a little bit difficult.
yeah.
But if you just remember that positive doesn't mean good and negative meaning bad, which is where I think a lot of people get a little bit kind of
Mm,
stuck. Positive just means that something is added to a situation,
yeah.
whether that's play, whether that's food, whether that's fuss, um, whether it's water for a swim. If something is added and the behavior increases afterwards, then that is a positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
If something is taken away and the behavior increases, that's normally that something in the environment that the dog doesn't like is taken away. So
Mm,
it might be that, and this is where it gets really awkward, but that is often when we're taking pain away from a dog. So if your
mm,
dog is walked on a choke collar and the release of the collar means that the pain is taken away and the behavior increases afterwards, and that is negative reinforcement.
yeah.
So I tend to stay out of the negative reinforcement area only because generally something aversive has to be
Yeah.
occurring in the first place. And that's where there is a lot of muddy water around.
Definitely. I think what we could do as well is somehow um at the end of this add in like an image of
Oh
the
dear
quadrant
Lord.
somehow.
Okay.
I think that I can do that easily on our videos. That's fine. So people can be like, okay, I'm a very visual learner, so I can talk about it to the cows come home. But until I've got it as like a picture
Yeah,
memory, yeah, it doesn't go anywhere. But yeah,
that's fine. I can probably find something and put a link in the podcast notes to it
yes,
as well. So we can there's loads of stuff floating around out there. But I think what we're really going to be focusing on today is the positive
Mm-hmm.
reinforcement. What can we add to an environment that is going to increase the likelihood of our dogs doing what we want them to do again in the future?
Yeah,
Rather than
and how can we adapt as we go along to make sure that it fits with the context that we're in and what your dog finds reinforcing in that situation, because that changes. So that's something that I find really, really interesting, and that I talk to a lot of our clients out, because we have a lot of reactive dogs and because we have a lot of nervous dogs, and we also have a lot of high drive breeds. That changes. Reinforcement changes quite a lot. And what types of reinforcement also change. So we have to think about that. So if we just think about maybe reinforcers.
Okay. Let's go through that. Yeah.
Let's tidy it up. So reinforcers that you might most commonly use. So food.
Yeah.
Toys.
Yeah. Play. Yeah.
Yeah. Play with anything. So you
play with anything.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. So I mean, I've used litter before. If you find a bottle on, a bottle on the floor is a really good one. Flirt poles, really good, something to chase. You might use sniffing for some dogs. You might use a bit of running. Some dogs
engagement with another dog.
Yeah,
you can use
exactly,
or any species really, safely, of course, but it doesn't have to be a dog. It could be for like your Labradors. It could be swimming, going for a swim.
Yeah.
Bathing in a muddy puddle for golden retriever owners who are listening are like, no.
Yeah.
They are hippos. It can be access, and this one's an awkward one because it can just be having a drink, but obviously we never want to deny that either. So it can be reinforced.
We don't want to specifically use it.
No, but there are also kind of primary reinforcers which are normally related to a biological need. So your food, your drink, sex is one, and interaction with other dogs. They're all like more of your primary reinforcers. Then your secondary reinforcers are more like your play, that kind of thing, swimming, that are not a biological need. So some have a little bit more power than others just because they're more related to survival.
Yeah. And then I suppose if you look at that as well, those reinforcers, you could split them into involving you or from you and involving the environment. So using environment for reinforcement is really good for dogs who struggle to access interacting with you, but also good for dogs that have that sort of chase drive, are really stimulated by the environment. So actually sometimes, this is one of the prime examples of some of the video recording that we've been doing, is that if you have a lamppost and your dog loves sniffing lampposts, this is a prime one we do it for, and your dog's like, I'm going to pull you on the lead because I really want to go and sniff that lamppost, and you're like, oh, this is not safe, hold on a second, and you just back up, and then you wait for your dog to check in. Is it more reinforcing for your dog? Are they more likely to come and check in with you in the future if you call them away and give them a treat, if you say, yes, go and sniff the lamppost? Like, definitely the second one, I think, for most part. I definitely agree. And I also think that the food, you're lowering the value of the food in that instance as well, aren't you? Because my dog might want to sniff something a lot. He'll always eat something, but am I actually reinforcing something, or am I adding something that's quite negative into the situation, and he'll eat in that situation anyway? So it's we call it bounce back, but there's loads of different names for that kind of thing as well. So it's and I've done this as well before with birds at a big distance, so a flock of birds where a terrier has just been like,
let me get at them,
it's so exciting, and you're like, okay, can you just check in with me for a second? And they check in with you, and if you've got an option there, you've got a real good opportunity for when that dog checks in with you. You've got two options, I'd say. You either run heck fast in the opposite direction with them so they get to chase you, or on a lead as far as safe is to do so, you allow them some running forwards towards the birds. And then you check in again and you do the same thing.
And that kind of training is called pre-mac training. So just because I like science, not you science, like words. I like the words, and I think sometimes people have heard these things, they don't quite know what it means. Pre-mac is that you're kind of getting a hard behavior out of your dog, and then they get the good stuff afterwards. So it's like you have to eat your broccoli and then you get pudding. So you can use it, and the environment is the easiest one to use pre-mac with, compared to using food or something. So
it's the dog's already chosen the reinforcer, and you're just asking them to do something, and then they get the thing that they've chosen as the reinforcer. And
I think that it's really powerful, because
massively,
the dog it gives you a level of how much they're going to pay you attention as well. Because if you're asking for some eye contact, or just even if it's for some dogs it's just like an ear twitch in your direction, you're like, okay, you are paying me some attention, now you can go, and I can build from that point forwards. But it really allows them to, like you say, choose their reinforcer and learn that they have to check in with you before they go and play with another dog. So that if that other dog is on a lead and is wearing a lot of yellow, and the owner is frantically trying to create some distance, you've got time to make a decision about whether they can go and see that dog or whether they don't, and what situation you're building up there, rather than the dog just going, dog, play, and running off to that dog who's quite anxious about dogs coming in there. So.
And within that as well, the way that you can help your dog to learn is to give them a cue that says, yes, you can go forward, or a cue that says, no, it's not safe, come with me.
Exactly.
And if they're clear, and clarity is everything, isn't it? So if you're clear and consistent with all of those experiences, and you're making sure that when you do the same thing, so check in, all right, well done, let's go this way, but I'm going to provide you with a hecking good reinforcer over here to make sure that you do that again. Or it's safe, well done, you can go that way. So if you have two of those things, so in our school we'd usually use a okay is just, it's fine for you to go. And then let's go is come with me in the other direction, or with me. So if you're clear with your dog, just make sure that you have that before you go into situations where you do need to sort of call them away.
But definitely having that 2 or 3 seconds where your dog's broken the eye contact with the birds or the other dog, and you can assess, because the other owner might be like, oh, they're fine, and then you can be like, okay, or go play, or that's my cue for it, like go play. So but you've built that in, and it reduces the frustration, and then you're not going to see other unwanted behaviors coming out along the way.
And the frustration is that, like, the main thing there, I think the dogs that I use this the most with, the pre-met principle, is probably adolescents. Because they're so like, yeah, but you're going to take me away from it, so I'm going to get struck. So, and effectively, when people, especially first-time dog parents, they're like, the dog's out of control and it's pulling at the end of the lead towards these things. So by letting it go and see it, am I reinforcing, the pulling to go and see it? And it's like, well, pick your battles at the minute, because what your dog really wants is over there, and it's a safe thing. It's something they want to go sniff on the floor, or it's a post somewhere. And you're like, well, okay, if I call them away from that post every time, they're going to work so much harder to try and get to it next time, because you've got this history of pulling them away, and it's really aversive.
And also you're kind of saying to the dog, like, it's that thing with children, isn't it? Like, the more you say no, the more they want it.
It's forbidden.
Whereas if you're like, you can go, we can absolutely, and I will stand by that lamppost for as long as I really can tolerate, but you've got to come back to me first, and you're not going to drag me to the lamppost. We're going to walk there together, and we're going to do it quite nicely, and then crack on, spend as long as you want there.
That's it. And what was I going to say? I was going to add to that then.
No, I don't know.
It went from my brain. It's
fine. That's right. It's really good on a podcast when you can't think what to say. Like, that's perfect.
Sorry. I was like excited. I hit up for it, and then it just
it'll come back. It'll come back. It's because the thing with this kind of conversation, and I'm sure everyone who's listening has the same kind of thing, when you're talking about something that you're passionate about, and you have a lot of knowledge and a lot of examples, someone will say something and your brain goes in a million different directions with like, oh, we could talk about this, we could talk about that, and then then you're like, oh no, I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything now.
Oh, I got it.
You see,
it's come back. Okay, so I'm coming back to, oh my God, I went really bright then. I'm going back to the litter scenario, because, when you've just said things are off limits, and litter generally is very off limits, and usually there's a lot of it. In where I live, the local villages and towns, there seems to just be loads of it. It's ridiculous.
It's bad.
And when you've got a little Cocker Spaniel puppy who just wants to put everything in its mouth, and it's like investigating, obviously, as not always new puppy parents, but quite often it is, it's terrifying thinking that they're just going to put everything in their mouth. So it's that instant reaction to jerk the leash tight every time you see something on the floor,
or force their mouth
or
open.
force it out their mouth. Yeah, exactly. And what unfortunately that does is it reinforces for the dog that you are going to try and take something away from them or take away access. So they do need to work harder to keep hold of it. So that it reinforces the worry of losing the access. Yeah.
And that in some breeds can then spiral into kind of a resource guarding.
Yeah.
Or I'll ingest it because then you can't get it off me, and they try and gulp it down. And some things like Stanley, I think we've talked about this podcast before. Stanley has a thing about banana skins.
Yeah.
Not a problem to me. We're not allowed to pull to the banana skin, but I actually don't care if you eat it or not because he's got a bit of an iron stomach. It doesn't seem to affect him. Crack on. Yeah. I could make a really big thing of the banana skins. I could make them the be all and end all of our walks. And whereas actually we find one every 3 walks, it's just not worth the time. And I can ask him to leave it and I can reward him for doing that. But at the same time, dogs don't have a lot of kind of extra sparks of joy. And if he wants the black banana skin, I have a choice to make. So sometimes when it's, when you know your dog as well, you can be a little bit more relaxed with stuff.
Yeah. And I think another note on that is that sometimes what people do is they'll take that very specific thing that their dog is obsessed with and they will do specific sessions on leave it. And sometimes I think that can make it worse because you glorify the object and you make it like a beacon of, this is the main thing we're working on, we're going to keep leave it. And people can do it well and people can do it really badly, where the dog's kind of over excitement threshold when it's around and they're doing leave it when it's up in the excitement threshold. And I feel like then they're just like, I want it even more now because we're doing all this work away from it. You're not letting me have it. So actually, something that I tend to do, especially with spaniels, is I will use litter outside and I'll teach them to target. So I do target training on litter and socks, thick, chunky socks. And I will click a train quite often because it's a lot quicker and more precise for humans. But what I'll do is I will, every time the dog goes over to that piece of litter or the thing I've put on the floor, I'll mark it and say, yes, well done for touching it. And then they get a reward for going over. So they've been able to go and look at the objects and sniff it. That's not been taken away from them. And they've got a treat from me and I'll send them back to it again. So it reduces the frustration of being taken away from it. And it reinforces that going and looking and sniffing is a good thing. And that's optimal again, because if you go and grab it, that doesn't really get you as much now. If you go and sniff it and look at it and lick it or whatever, you get treats for it. So
I always tell, and it does tend to be gun dog breeds and gun dog crosses, so you cockapoos, labradoodles, that kind of thing, that if they can't destroy it and eat shards of it, and if they can't swallow it in one, ignore it. Like, I think sometimes we're so paranoid about our dogs picking stuff up that the water bottle that they've picked up on their walk, or the empty can, my old Springer was obsessed with picking up like beer cans that were I think because they're probably quite smelly.
Yeah, they do stink. Yeah,
they are more smelly than like a Coke can, I think. And so, but you can really make that a problematic behavior. Whereas actually, if they're carrying a can round, can't see them ingesting it.
That's it.
Just ignore it. Just walk away from it, because you can make the picking up and ingesting really reinforcing. Whereas if you ignore it, there's how much reinforcement are they actually getting from that one item without any external things being added to it? Probably not loads. And if you have a dog who loves carrying something in their mouth, give them something to carry.
100%, which is most good dogs.
Absolutely. Millie, if we didn't take her ball on her walk, she would find a stick. She'd be like, I'm going to carry something has to be in my mouth. Fine. Not that fine that she was carrying a stick, fine that she would carry something.
And that's it. I think it's knowing your dog. It's being brave enough if you're anxious about them picking things up to just test the waters a little bit and loosen your lead. Loosen your lead, please
loosen your lead in all situations. Please loosen your lead.
That's it. So I think it's kind of thinking about where your dog's baseline is with stuff like that now. So if they are a new puppy, or they're a dog that just is that kind of goes out and is like, oh, let's look for things on the floor, and then they pick it up and then they play with it and then they drop it and they find another thing. Brilliant. If your dog hasn't swallowed, isn't a swallower and isn't a ingester, great, leave it, carry on and move. If your dog has a habit of perhaps picking it up and guarding it, picking it up and lying down near it and not moving, or swallowing, then we work on it. And that's mostly the dogs that I work with through the targeting stuff, because it does help. Like, you can't leave that, because that's quite bad.
Absolutely. And I think that the more we can ignore stuff, especially when you have a puppy or an adolescent, you have literally a million things to work on. You want to get them walking nicely on a lead, you need to socialize them, you need to get them to settle, you need to get them in a sleeping pattern, you have to toilet train them, they're probably nipping you. Like, the list is endless. So if they're just picking stuff up and like, look at me parading it around, brilliant, crack on, ignore that, don't worry about it, don't add. You need to teach a leave it and you need to teach a drop it, but you don't need to be taking things off your puppy. Like, just worry about what you need to worry about. And if we can manage stuff and if we can avoid teaching stuff at the time, just if they're just carrying an empty bottle around, fine, crack on, let them do it, because you've got so much to work on.
Yeah,
it can feel a little bit overwhelming sometimes.
It can be really overwhelming. I quite like, it depends again, if it's a gun dog breed, I quite like if they do pick something up, I just go, yeah, pretty good. And if they bring it back to me, even better.
Absolutely.
I've got a retrieve set in, which I can use later. And also they feel confident enough to bring whatever they find over, and it's not a problem. And I can probably, if it's, if I need to get rid of it, I can just swap it out.
Millie was a picker things up and carry them round. And to the day she died, she would bring me socks. If she found a sock, she would bring me a sock. Because when she was a puppy, that's what she wanted to do. So I just rewarded her with a little treat for bringing me a sock. I never really tried to take the socks off her. I think we probably lost a few socks along the way, she was like, oh, it's quite nice to chew this one. And if I faded out the treats pretty quick, but she'd just bring me a sock. And I'd be like, oh, that's great. I'll pop it back in the wash. But she could have guarded those socks. We could have taken her down a route where, oh no, she's got a sock, quick, get it off her, and all of this, and really added to that situation. But because I was like, amazing, here's a treat, thanks for the sock. Well, no, always wanted one. It just made it die out really quick, and she would just then bring me a sock. So and we have again high proportion of gun dogs in the school, so we do find that. Cool. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was how your rewards change depending on what you're doing and where you are. And one of them that I sort of wanted to highlight was, like, for example, if you're trying to switch between treats and toys. So again, some people do like the throw a ball, bring the ball back, give you a treat. And this is the ball.
Yeah, so, which is fine for some dogs. They switch between the two well. But what you have to think about then is where, if you're going to make a list of valuable reinforcers for your dog. So if sausage is at the top and chicken, whatever, blah, 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 and then you get frisbee out and you've got a border collie and you throw the frisbee and your dog comes back with the frisbee and they're like, this is the best thing in the world. Where does sausage now sit in that list?
Yeah.
Because maybe a still, even like for border collie, it might be even further, that a still frisbee on the floor is zero interesting because it's not moving. So actually sausage might be through the roof. Whereas if you're constantly then throwing your frisbee and your border collie is like in chase mode, they might not be interested in the food. And what can often happen there, and I've seen it happen quite a lot, is people will then try and give their dogs food, and it's almost like, eat the food. It is positive reinforcement because it's treats. Therefore, you must feel good about it. And actually, the dog's like, I don't really want it because
you can see them moving their heads like
they
away.
Literally avoid. Yeah. So what is effectively happening there when you see your dog do that is the food becomes a bit aversive because you're sort of forcing it in their face and they're saying, I don't want it. And you're poisoning your value of your food because it once was really valuable and now they're like, I'm not keen for it. So actually it's not in their high five now. You're just kind of ruining your opportunity to reinforce with actual the thing that your dog wants, which
and
is,
if you're trying to get them to bring the frisbee back and then trying to shove food in their mouth,
yeah,
you're potentially making the return with the frisbee disappear, and then you get the dogs that just chase after the frisbee, catch it, run round for a bit, but stay quite far away from you, because they're like, no, because if I go near you, you're going to take the frisbee off me and you're going to try and shove some sausage I don't want to eat.
Yeah, definitely. I sometimes think about this with you know, the endurance running mango or banana squeezy pouches that you can get, and when I'm running, they taste amazing.
Okay.
Because that mango is so sweet. It's
you
just
lie.
like, oh my God.
They never taste good.
No, it is. It's like my body's like, I need this. Like whatever this tastes like, I think I really need it. And then I've tried and sampled some of them when I've not been running, and I'm like, I can't eat that. That's so sweet. And it's like, it changes whether I like something or not, changes depending on where I am.
Yeah, I jest, but I know what you mean. But I run on Percy Pigs, and Percy Pigs taste amazing all the time.
Well, yeah, that's that's different. And the other thing as well, so not necessarily just food, and I say this a lot to people, like daily, is fuss.
Yes.
And that changes. So you might have a cockapoo or Lhasa Apso, I don't know, a dog that quite likes being cuddly with you.
Yeah.
And wants to jump on your lap and really loves the fuss around the neck and around the head. And you find that as a human really reinforcing. You like that. That's nice for you. And then you go into a training environment. So we did this with scent work the day. I had a dog in scent work, and the dogs are like, okay, I'm in work mode. Brilliant. This is really good. I'm going to go find the scent. Did that, find the scent, blah, blah, blah. Comes back, gets a treat from mum, and then mum goes,
yeah, loads of
and fuss. The dog go, for anyone that's listening, that's kind of like the grabbing your hands around their head and being very like scratchy and fussy. And the dog, you can literally see the dogs back off.
Yeah.
And so I said this, I spoke to clients about this, and again, it's not just them, it's in other aspects as well. And I was saying, what do you think your dog wants in this moment in time? More than anything, food. Okay. So you're giving them the food, and then what's happening after? Oh, I'm fussing them. Okay. And what has your dog done? They've backed away. So if your dog thinks, do the task, get the food, get grabbed around the head, what is your dog going to then stop doing or stop wanting to do? And they're like, scent work. I was like, yes. Perfect. They're going to stop doing the thing that you want them to do because they're anticipating that you're going to do the thing that they're not enjoying in that moment. So you're also then ruining kind of the scent work, but you're also ruining the value of the treat, because the treat then is followed by the fuss that they don't want.
Yeah.
So actually, the best thing you could do in that moment is don't put your hands anywhere near your dog.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I've just been working with a dog this morning who is really terrified of the outside world and people in it, and traffic and people. And we went from the first session when I went to their house, and the dog hid upstairs for the entire hour and a half that I was in the house, would not come. Now he comes up and he's like resting his chin on my knee, wants butt scratches, and now I can scratch him round the face. Whereas I've been very cautious with that, because a lot of dogs, it's too intense. So I did a lot of he's a rough collie, so he's got lots of fur to like get his hands in and scratch. Really
tactile, so
yeah, it's really reinforcing for me. But the softest fur is around his head, and it looks soft as well. And I have part of it is that he won't take food in a lot of situations because he's too stressed, which is fine. So we were talking today about creating distance and just letting him watch and see like what people do, so he can start to have a little bit of predictability. Predictability is quite reinforcing for dogs. And maybe give him some scratches on his back to let him know that we're there, and like to try and relax him a little bit. And the owner kept trying to go like for the head, and I was like, no, because we're blocking him from being able to see, and also it's quite intense, whereas we want it to be subtle fuss, because we don't have a lot of other reinforcers that we have available for us. He won't play, he won't eat, and he just wants to watch. So we do need to add a little bit of something in, but very gently in the background of it all, rather than it being like what he loves at home, which is having his ears scratched and his back all like massaged and quite intense fuss. That he's not going to like that level of fuss in a different environment as well. No. So
That's it. And I saw it written somewhere as a clinical touch. So
Okay.
clinical touch is
Sounds,
yeah,
sounds
it sounds
a bit
weird.
white coatish, doesn't it? Like
Yeah,
clinical
yeah.
touch.
There's some other names for it as well, but I think it was more in a state of it's there to heal for some reason or
Yeah.
to reassure. So it's a careful use of being tactile, touching to help your dog in a certain way. So I think
Yeah.
it's through T-touch that it comes as well.
Yeah.
So it's about, thinking about where you're placing your hand and how slowly you're doing it. So when you're
Yeah.
playing with your dog and they're excited and they love it and they come in and they're like, that's me. And you're like, you could be a little bit more kind of like rough and tumble with them. In that environment, it's a gentle placement of your hand, nice and firmly, or just a little gentle tickle
Yeah.
somewhere where it's predictable for them. So
Yeah.
the back and the chest are generally quite good places,
Yeah.
rather than obscuring, like you said, a face or going near the legs.
Yeah. So you have to think about, like you say, when it's appropriate to you. It's fuss is the big one. Food is probably up there as well. Play, you can't really do. If the dog's not engaging with play, you're stuck. You haven't got it. I think with play, you either have the availability to do it and the dog will enjoy doing it, or they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
It's not like food where you can kind of, and so for some dogs like Stanley, he will take food in any situation regardless of his stress level, because it overrides everything. Not every dog is like that. And sometimes if they grab at the treat as well, if they snatch it out of your hand, that's a sign that they're taking the food but they're not happy about it. I know some dogs snatch generally, but it's when it's a difference. We're always looking for differences, aren't we? But with fuss, that's all in our control. Like, we choose whether we're fussing the dog or not, and we have to check that the dog is happy with that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just reading your dog, and it's just being able to take a step back from your own like wants and needs. Yeah, in that moment, which is hard.
You can also test it. I mean, I use the 3-second consent test a lot. So you gently fuss your dog for about 3 seconds, no more, and then see what they do. Are they like nudging your hand for more, or are they like, thank God you've stopped, and backing off? And then you can see if they want it in a particular situation. And if in that situation they go, I didn't really care for that, then we remove it altogether.
Yeah. And you just spoke then about taking food as a behavior. So you said that Stanley can do that in all environments because he's learned to do it, and it is a good skill to have, because you can use it and develop it for dogs that are not good at taking food in certain environments. But then what we also do is we get a lot of dogs that will appease their owners and take food because it's there in front of them, and they feel like to get out of the situation that they're been stuck in, they have to take the food in order to move on. And that's when that food becomes poisoned and aversive, because we're not using it to say, well done, there's a good behavior, here's a treat. We're saying, you must take this to move on, and it is very different.
Definitely.
You're reinforcing a being trapped fear in that moment. So
definitely. I think also the timing of food is really important, because a lot of people will get their dog past the scary thing and then feed the food. And again, it's like moving past the scary thing. The food is contingent upon moving past the scary thing. Whereas actually, if you can remove some of the fear, then that helps as well. So it's making sure that you're not in some ways bribing your dog. Like, if you get past the dog, then you can have the food. But if you don't get past the dog, or you react, then there is no food available. That's where it becomes really a delicate balancing act.
It really is. And it, like, I can see why people, when people don't have any sort of knowledge of behavior and dog psychology, like just as a general dog owner, it's an absolute minefield to work out how to work with it, because you really have to take time to step back and understand the dog in front of you.
Absolutely.
And you almost, I mean, you probably with your one-to-ones and behavior consults spend a lot of time on actually learning about your dog first before you try and fix and change anything. And that's with our Treetops Hub, it's the same thing. The first 2 steps in there are all about, diet, dogs' likes, dogs' dislikes, dogs' health, dogs, all of these things, how they feel about the world, before you can even start doing stuff.
Totally, it is. And it's understanding what's reinforcing and what isn't reinforcing, because as humans we think something is reinforcing for our dogs, but it's not necessarily.
Yeah.
And we need to break that down so that they can understand, and when it's appropriate to reinforce and when it isn't. So I went to see a dog yesterday and it has destroyed a lot of furniture, but they've managed to save their sofa, so they're very precious. But every time the dog went near the sofa, they would call it away and reward it. And so they had this lovely little feedback loop going of the dog, which is a Labrador, going, ha, and I had to get a snack.
Okay.
Near the sofa, you can have a snack. So you have to be quite careful about the order in which you're doing stuff as well, because dogs are very good at going, oh, okay, cool. It's like loose lead walking. Dog pulls on the lead, the owner calls the dog back, dog comes back, and they get a snack. Brilliant. To get that snack, I have to have pulled on my lead. If I pull on my lead, they'll call me back and I'll get a snack. The only way I can get my snack is if I'm ahead of them to come back for the snack. And that I see that when I'm driving. I mean, I see it with clients who, when I'm helping with loose lead walking, but when I'm driving around, and I'm sure you do the same as a trainee, or watching people engage with their dogs.
Yes.
Oh, I could change that for you in about 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And make it completely different, because the dog's like, I bungee to the end of my lead, I come back, I get a snack.
And that also, so that happens a lot. That also can be if the dog is quite like overstimulated by the environment. So it might look similar, but yeah. So we were walking with one of the dogs today that we work with, and he's a husky. So when he's on a straight bit of road, so we do the treetops ledges, when he's on a straight bit of road, he hasn't really got his loose lead walking sorted yet, so he still bungees in anticipation of what's in front. And he'll come back and check in, but he has learned now end of lead means turn to mum. So the next step of that is going to be, let's make sure that reinforcement happens for you walking a couple of steps next to us and not in front of us. So it's step by step, you can get to that point. But it is, thinking about what you are reinforcing accidentally sometimes.
Because what you think you're reinforcing and what the dog thinks you're reinforcing can sometimes be two completely different things.
Oh, yes.
And I think if you have an anxious dog in any way, I have a lot where people say, I've got a loose lead walking problem. Right? No, your dog has an anxiety problem. And because of that, they're pulling on the lead to either escape, get home, move faster through things, whatever it might be. Yeah. I love one of my favorite questions is, what do you think you're reinforcing there? Or what are you aiming to reinforce there? And people are like, oh, I want them to come away from something.
I like one of my favorites is to say to people, tell me what you want your dog to do without saying any negative words. What do you mean? And I'm like, well, what do you want your dog to do? Not pull.
Not pull.
That's not instructive. You're not allowed to use a negative. I want you to tell me what you would like your dog to do. And they're like, walk next to me. I'm like, well, that's what I want you to reinforce. Okay. And they're like, oh yeah. Because a lot of it is, I want my dog to stop. Or I need my dog not to. And if you don't know what you want your dog to do, your dog doesn't know what you want to do. So you need to figure out what you want, and then brilliant, we can go from there. Now we've got something that's actionable for your dog.
Absolutely. And I think, like you say, you have to be really clear in your mind about what you're reinforcing, because as soon as you are clear, because like with loose lead walking, how loose do you want the lead? Where do they need to be? I'm not like really strict nose next to knee walking to heel. Mine is no tension in the lead, and the dog can then therefore be in a lot of different locations, but as long as there's no tension in the lead. So like that's my criteria for my dog's loose lead walking. So I always try and break down what people really want their dog to do and how focused it needs to be.
And it can change. Like you can start with a very vague idea. Like you said, it could be that you're on a grassy area with your, I always say Cocker Spaniel because I just feel like the fizziest, the loveliest of the fizziest. Or, your pointer, whatever, who is
You're just naming all my dog breeds, is that it? We're just
you've got a pointer. Sorry. I'm just thinking good dogs because I work with most of them. Or your, I don't know, your terrier who's super independent and just likes to go off and do their thing. And it might be that your first step is that you want them to be a little bit closer to you on their 5 meter long line. You want them to sort of hone in a little bit. So you think about, okay, what am I going to reinforce here? I'm going to reinforce my dog being within 4 meters on a 5 meter long line, and I'm going to mark and reward for that. And then what it could be is, okay, that's successful. So next week, my reinforcement, what I want to reinforce is them being within 3 meters, and that can change, and how you deliver that treat can change. So it has to be fluid and it has to be flexible, because it will change depending on your dog's skill level at the time and also which environment that you're in. So with any behavior, I think if you strip it back and you just go, what do I want to see more of? And how can I make it worth it for my dog?
Yeah.
Ultimately, you're then going to have a good pairing.
You just reminded me of something there. So I worked with a very small rescue, and I was their behaviorist, and they had dogs from Romania come over, and we would kind of get them to a point where they could go and live in a home. And they had this dog who was pretty much not ever going to be suitable for a house living. And she had no reinforcement. She wasn't overly fussed about interaction. It was probably the strongest thing we had. No, absolutely no play drive, not fussed at all about food, nothing. So I just sat with one of the owners in their kind of garden, and we were just chatting about her, about how to make her life as enriched as possible when she didn't really, there was no joy coming from her for anything apart from the fact she quite liked being with people. So she would go and sit in the office with them and stuff, but she was very chilled. I loved her to pieces. I would have quite happily had her. And I don't know what I did, but I threw some food. I just like absent-mindedly just tossed it, and she pounced on it, and I was like, oh
light bulb.
Oh my God. So I did it again, and she pounced on it again, and I was like, I think we found it.
Yeah.
So, you know, there is always something, but because she was absolutely disinterested in food, I hadn't really thought about playing around with it that much, just because it had to sort of going to just be like throwing loads of treats into the grass. So sometimes you have to, there is like a little thing where you're like, oh God.
Yeah, that does happen. Yeah. I do find that with international rescues, to be fair, because they've just had so much of a history of being lured and coaxed that if you throw something, your reinforcement, away from you,
yes,
in the opposite direction, they're more likely to go and get it. But yeah, sometimes it's the chase, sometimes it's the digging for it, sometimes I remember training an elk hound years ago, and he just had to have a different reinforcer for everything. So I could do one bit of agility with him for a blade of grass that I found on the floor, and then it might be his antler, and then we'd change it and it would be a leaf. And he, as long as it was different, it was reinforcing for him. That's hard.
It's hard when you're going out on a walk, isn't it? And you're like, right, here's my rucksack full of everything, and I'm going to throw stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, I definitely
use the environment. Literally,
you can use the environment,
whatever.
Yeah, but at the same, you have to be quite creative with that. There's only so many things sometimes. But yeah, I think that is another thing. Well, we could talk about this all day, but another thing is, I think sometimes dog treats are like a box of chocolates. In that, if you just take chicken out with you, you can only eat so many plain chocolates before you get a bit like, I don't really want any more. But if you have, like, one time you have a fruity chocolate, and the next one's like a praline, and then you have a nutty chocolate, and then I don't know, biscotti or whatever, like that variety means I can eat a lot more chocolates before I get kind of done with them. And so if you just go out with chicken, or you just go out with cheese or kibble, there's only so many times that's going to be reinforcing before the dog's like, I just don't want any more.
Yeah. And on a side note, don't use chocolates to reinforce your dog.
Side note, they're human reinforcement, not dog reinforcement. But having variety, I think that kind of slight unknown with what is it helps build that reinforcement as well.
Yeah, and if your dog, so the biggest thing I think is if people have dogs with allergies, that's really tricky.
Yeah.
Or, upset stomachs. So something you can do is, if you get a tub of whatever they can eat, and if it's not an allergy and it's just a bit of an intolerance, you can put something stinky in with that food when it's in the fridge for a couple of days, and then take that thing out. So that it just marinates it a little bit. Obviously, if you've got an allergy, then that's a different story. But with an allergy, if you've got a food that they can have, so there's one dog where we were like, potatoes, like one of the very few things it can eat. You can mash it, you can, cook it into cubes, you can do quite a lot of things with that potato. It's quite versatile. So you're just thinking about, what can I use and how can I use it, rather than just the, singularly as it is.
And with proteins, if it's an intolerance to proteins, there are so many things on the market now, so many novel proteins that you can use as well. So it is worth checking with behaviorists and trainers, because we do have a kind of random depth of knowledge about stuff like this. Like you say, we very random. We can create new reinforcers out of old stuff quite easily, but also we can be like, actually, at one time I saw kangaroo dog treats. It might be worth trying those, because
or
if your dog
insects
can't eat,
seems to
and
be
insects, another one. So that we do have a random depth of knowledge because we need it.
And we've come across so many people with the problems we've had to problem solve,
and we spent so long trying to work out what to reinforce that dog by, that we have a random list. We might not give it as a primary list, but in the back of our minds we're like, actually, we know 𝑗𝑟 do have a whatever they have on their random list of proteins. So I think it's understanding your dog is key. Understanding what they like in each different situation and environment is really helpful. And then having a list of reinforcers that are going to help, that don't become negative at some point. And watch your dog's body language.
Well, what I'll do, we've got a really good reinforcement audit that Steph made, which is a PDF, and I will, again, like we said with the image, we'll try and find a way to copy that in, because
I'll put them on a Google Drive, and then we can just link to it.
Perfect.
Documents. We put those in the show notes if anyone's interested. Then you can have a look there. And maybe next week we'll do the other side. Let's do like positive and negative punishment as an well, negative punishment isn't the worst thing in the world. We use that all the time, whether you know you do or don't. So
it's true.
Let's do that.
I can test my brain.
Right then, we'll see you next week.
Will do. Bye.
Bye.